Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. I'm Ian Banner. This is an Agile Bite. Agile Bites are short videos that are delivered to your inbox nearly every Friday morning, depending on my workload, where I talk about stuff to do with Agile. And they're free. And this particular one is called "How a Scrum Board Saved My Marriage." Um, and I'll explain that title later. What this is really about is Scrum boards and what they are and how they work. And really, Scrum boards are an example of something that is what would normally be called a sticker wall, where you put information up on a wall in front of people to help them understand tasks and what's got to be done. An example is a Scrum board. Another example would be what's called Kanban boards. Kanban literally in Japanese means sticker wall. Scrum boards and Kanban boards can be physical. You can stick them on a wall. Sometimes they are whiteboards, but sometimes you just use a wall with post-its and Sharpies. I'll show you some examples later. They can be digital. There are digital versions of these that are available on most digital devices now. I'll do a whole Agile Bite on the digital versions of these things and what works and what doesn't work. But usually digital ones are used when teams aren't all in the same physical location, when you spread across several offices. But they also do have several other advantages, digital ones, once you've got to use them. But really, there's another Agile Bite on the use of digital boards. We'll leave it to there. The reason these kind of sticker walls really work is because you have to understand how the brain works. So here's a picture of a brain, that's sort of brain inside a man. What I want to show you is a couple of areas of the brain and how they work. And the first one I want to show you is what we would call the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is this bit here. It's where you do all your thinking, all your analysis, all your decisions. It's in fact very good for decisions. Deciding options, deciding between certain activities you might or might not do. What shall I do today? Which task shall I work on? Who do I like? Who do I hate? Which route to take to work? Who shall I marry? That's all in the prefrontal cortex area. Another area of your brain that does a lot of activities for you is down here, this area here, and this is called the basal ganglia. So let me just write that word on there, ganglia. And this one up here, that is the prefrontal cortex. So the basal ganglia is where things go to live once they've become grooved in your brain, in your membranes. So when you learn to drive, for example, you're really using this area here to learn to drive. You're learning all the skills, getting the clutch point correct if you're in English, deciding how to put it into manual if you use a manual system. But what happens is once you've learned how to drive, all those grooves, they move into your basal ganglia, which is why you don't have to think about driving once you've learned. So the basal ganglia takes care of long-term stuff like breathing, like how you're feeling emotionally long-term, things like that. Now these two areas are very different in your brain. This prefrontal cortex requires an awful lot of energy to run. This prefrontal cortex requires loads of energy to run. It's a high energy area. That's why if you're sort of tired or if you have jet lag, things like that, you haven't got the energy, this bit doesn't work very well. The basal ganglia is low energy. It's much easier to use this area for long-term stuff. Hence, breathing works. This is how our brain's designed. And as I said, the prefrontal cortex is great for decision making. It's not at all good for time stuff. So the idea that is well expressed in David Allen's book Getting Things Done is your prefrontal cortex will remind you you've got to mow the lawn when you're sitting on on an airplane waiting to taxi and take off. It reminds you things of completely the wrong time. So if you store stuff in your prefrontal cortex, then you stand a chance of not remembering it at the right times. And even if you do remember it at the right time, actually you're using your prefrontal cortex for the wrong things. It's designed to make critical decisions. It's like super fast memory RAM on a computer. You know, you don't want to store your Word documents there. You store your Word documents on much slower physical storage elsewhere on the computer. And that's how the sort of prefrontal cortex and the basal ganglia work in combination with each other. Now, the best book that explains this, if you're interested in this area, is by a guy called, I should mention it, David Rock. He's written a few really good books, and this one is called How Your Brain Works. How Your Brain Works. The book is quite expensive, but you can look up him doing a talk on this at Google. So if you look YouTube's up on How Your Brain Works, he's probably done lots and lots of TEDs as well. So let me just recap this. Your prefrontal cortex is great at making decisions. It's not that good at visualizing. Your basal ganglia, low energy, is where you put things to live. So let me give an example of this that is really easy to understand. And it's like this. I want you to imagine now a blank piece of paper. If you can, get a piece of paper and a pen and get ready to do an exercise. It will be better if you've got some paper around, that'd be great. You can do it without the paper and pen, but it's a much better exercise if you have a piece of paper and pen. Okay, and what we're going to do is this. I'm going to ask you to do an exercise now on that piece of paper, and I'm going to count to 10. And what I want you to do is get as far into that exercise as you can over those 10 seconds. Okay, and here is the exercise. I want you to imagine all the letters of the alphabet in their capital form, left to right. I want you to imagine them. Now, don't write them down, just imagine them. And now I want you to write down all of them that are just made up of straight lines. Count to 10. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good. How did you do? Probably got 5, maybe 6, maybe 7 written down. Okay, I want you to do exactly the same exercise again, but I want you to look at the screen now as you do it. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Finish. How did you do this time? And the simple truth is you'd have got a lot further because your brain is not trying to visualize the letters, they're in front of you. That's why these post-it walls, sticker walls, scrum board, Kanban, that's why these are so useful and are becoming more and more productive because essentially they're tuned to how your brain works. Okay, hope that makes sense. And that's why they work. Could do more on this, but I'll move on. So here's a new question. What are the elements of a board? Well, usually the elements of a board, there are usually some lines that go down the board. Let's put a few on this piece of paper here. And over here there is usually a to-do list. Things you've got to do. And usually you put them in post-its. That's my representation of a post-it. One post-it for each thing you have to do. Sometimes there can be big things which have several small post-its that are needed. For example, maybe the big thing is tidy the bedroom. You're giving that to your son to do, and he has in that list of things to do. He's got to sort out his washing. He's got to go through that cupboard and find out whether all the books in there still need to be there. And so what happens is, as you take something that's in to do, you move it to a column called WIP, or work in progress, or sometimes it's just called in progress. All of those things are perfectly fine. And what happens is the activity moves from being in the to-do list. It moves to being in the in progress list. So it's moved. And then when it finishes its in progress, usually it moves to another column called done. It's over here. There's another column I've left on there, and that is on some boards. It's probably worth knowing, and it's called blocked. So the idea is when something can't be done because something is stopping it, you move it. You don't leave it in progress, you just move it to blocked, and it stays there until it can be done. An example, maybe the task is to clean the kitchen and put the dishwasher on. That could be the big task. And maybe you can't put the dishwasher on because there aren't any dishwasher tablets, and you need someone to go to the supermarket to buy the dishwasher tablets. And therefore, that activity, the sticker for it, the post-it for it, will go into blocked. And then over at the end here, you might have another column, which is usually called something like impediments. And there you might write, someone needs to go and buy some dishwasher tabs. I'll just write the word tabs to explain that there. And the idea is once that's finished, that one will disappear, that one will come from unblocked back into work in progress, and then it will move to done when it's done. And you might have some other tasks that go down this sticker wall as you go along here. So that's the elements of a Scrum board. Usually they are post-its or card. Blue tack can be used. Usually there's a whiteboard involved. Maybe you haven't got a whiteboard at home, in which case there are a couple of things you can do. I'd like to recommend Magic Whiteboard to you. It says what it does on the can, really. It's like a toilet roll, really long roll, and it's got a friction thing on it, so you can put it on any flat wall, tear a piece off. They're quite big, it's sort of A0 size. And you turn the wall into a whiteboard, and you can write on it with whiteboard markers, and you can rub them off, and you can peel the paper back off again. You can actually get Magic Whiteboard paint. So if maybe you've got a den or somewhere, you could take an area of the wall and paint it with the Magic Whiteboard paint, and then that turns it into a whiteboard. So that's some of the physical elements you might have. Let me answer another quick question, which is the difference between Scrum and Kanban. Okay, so they are the two main sticker walls that are known. There are some variations of those. They're both examples of a visual system to track stuff getting done. Usually Kanbans are personally based stuff now. Notice there's personal Kanbans. Scrum tends to be a team-based activity, but that's not always true. The difference between Scrum and Kanban is where the constraint is. And essentially, they both force you to think about things you've got to do and when you want to get them done by, but they do it in different ways. In Scrum, the constraint is usually an iteration or a sprint. Let's assume it's an iteration. Let's assume it's a week. Another word for that is sprint. So let's assume that's a week. So the idea is, on a Scrum board, you'd list everything you're going to do in a week. And that focuses your mind. This is what we've got to get done in a week. Let's get on with it. Usually there's a team involved. Different people move things into in progress. But the constraint is you're going to try and finish by the end of the week all this stuff. I refer you to another one of the Agile Bite videos called Scrum in a Nutshell, where we talk about you plan at the start of a sprint, you commit to that work, and at the end of the sprint you do that work. You don't add extra work in, you don't take work out. Your aim is to hit the target of the work that you've got to do. So that's what Scrum does. It constrains by the length of the sprint or time. A Kanban tends to constrain in a different way. You still usually have your to-do and you still usually have your done, but what you'll do in your WIP, work in progress, is that can only have a certain number of things in it at any time. This is called your WIP constraint. Let's say your WIP constraint is 5. That means 5 activities off your to-do list. Only 5 can move into work in progress at any time. And that typically is for a day. So my personal Kanban, I have a WIP of 6. So there are 6 things every morning. So I'm going to get those 6 done. If I've done those 6, I'll be very happy. Once I've done 3 of them, I can bring some more things onto my list if I want to, or I could decide to just finish the 6. When I started doing a personal Kanban, I was very optimistic about how much I'd do, and so I'd put like 9 things in every day to do. And what I realised over a week or two was that actually, even though I wanted to get 9 things done, I was only getting 4 things done a day. And I thought, okay, what I need to do here is limit my WIP to 4. And when you do that, what you then do is go, okay, what of all this stuff do I really need to do today? You know, I've got to pay that parking fine before it goes up to 100 quid. I've definitely got to do that today. I better put that in today. Writing my next Agile Bites video. Oh, I've got to get that done today, otherwise I can't get it out for Friday, because we have a process for that. And the idea is, if I see lots of people who use Kanban, but they don't limit their WIP. They just put stuff in. The point is, it constrains you to think about what's important and the order that things have to be done in. So that's a brief understanding of the difference between Scrum versus Kanban for the purposes of an Agile Bite. There'll be more on this in other videos. What I want to do now is just give you some examples of Scrum boards. Here's one. I've just taken this from the internet. You can see there. There is the to-do. There is the in progress. There is what sprint it's in. This stuff here is really interesting because the stuff that's not being done this week in the sprint is also on the same physical piece of board in the sky, as it were, on the wall, and it's showing it's getting ready to be brought in for the next sprint. That's quite common to have what is your product backlog on the same board as your sprint backlog. Those are two different things in Agile. Again, I'll talk through those on another Agile Bite called artifacts, which ones are which, but there's a product backlog where you describe what the product is over time, what you need to do over the next 6 months to get your product finished, and then you have a sprint backlog, which is what you're doing right now in your sprint. So that's an example of one. Here's another one. More columns on this one, slightly darker to see, but you get the same idea. In this one, they've used colours to mean different things. That does sometimes happen. Sometimes the colours are used to describe who's doing a job. Sometimes it's used to describe the urgency of jobs. I'm not a fan of using colours like that. I just tend to use any post-it of any colour at any time, and I think the boards look colourful, but the colour doesn't mean anything. If I showed you these in detail, you'd see some of these have names on. Here is an example from a Scandinavian coach who is really is just, I think it's quite cute. He's got his little kids, and they are doing the same thing. They're doing to do, in progress, done, and they're working out what they need to do and what's next. And as you can see, he's put some little stickers on these, which is great for kids when they get things done. That's an example. Here's another one. Again, some stuff is the backlog. This is the stories they want to do. That's the to-do. That's the in progress. That's got to verify. There's obviously something to do there. And then done. So you can see that the process here, as well as in progress in this one, has someone's going to verify it's all finished, which is quite cool. I see this guy or lady has put it on a window, so she's got a lovely colourful picture behind her, and that's quite a nice thing to do. I know lots of people who do have them on windows. In fact, there was a girl who came on one of my training courses who said she was organising her marriage day using post-its that she got on her French windows into the garden. And so she showed me this picture of to do, one of the windows you got to do with lots of post-its on, in progress, done, and she got 5 weeks before her marriage, and they were reminding her and her boyfriend what they got to get done. And, they were a bit behind schedule, and I said, well, this is really like a Kanban, so I would limit your work in progress to 3 things a day and try and make sure you always do those 3. So that's the idea. Before I move to my final bit, which is the homework shower challenge, I do want to tell you where the title for this came from. How a Scrum board saved my marriage. And it's a guy who spoke to me at a conference, and he talked about how I'd been on one of my courses on how to do certain things, and he'd taken the principal home with him. And he'd said to his wife, they weren't getting on particularly well. She thought he was a bit lazy, I think. He probably was lazy. He wasn't getting things done at home. Every weekend he wanted to go to the pub and watch the football. His wife would not be happy about that because there were things to do at the house. And so in one of my trainings, I mentioned that, some families use Scrum boards to communicate better and be transparent about what they're doing. So he took the idea home and said to his wife, look, why don't we try this? Write down on post-its everything, all the chores you want me to do in the house. And she wrote them all on a piece of paper and put them all up on a wall. And he went, okay, so I also want to go to the football. So why don't you choose 2 of them that I'll do this weekend? And if I do them, you won't complain if I go to the football match. So she looked through the list and did it for a while and then chose 2 of them, and he said, okay, I'm going to do those. And so he did them and moved them to done, and she could see that he'd done 2 things. Several things were happening here. One of them was, because the things were being moved to done and being left on the board as done, she started to see that her husband was actually getting things done. She could see the done pile growing. When she thought of something he needed to do, instead of worrying about it and putting it into a basal ganglia and forgetting about it for 3 weeks, then suddenly remembering it and wondering why he hadn't done it, she would simply add it to the to-do list. And every Friday they'd sit and she'd look at what was there and decide what he would do as chores, maintenance on the house, cut the garden, sort out the fence, etc. And they started to communicate and they started to discuss what to do. And then the next thing was she started writing the stuff that she was doing on the board so she could show him what she was doing. Now, I'm not trying at all to be sexist about husbands and wives and caricature about who works and who's lazy or not. I'm merely saying that this Scrum board, as a tool of communication, helped them with their marriage. And the quote that the guy said to me is a genuine quote. He said, that Scrum board idea saved my marriage. We were going nowhere. We're getting on a lot better now. So that's how a Scrum board saved his marriage. I'm going to finish now with the homework shower challenge. If you watched the earlier videos, I don't give you written homework, but I do ask you to think about something. And so I call it the homework shower challenge because it's something you can do when you're in the shower or you're riding a bike or going on a run, that kind of thing. And it's this: somewhere in your life or work, where could a task board be useful? Not a notice board, not a, a diary or a calendar kind of thing. They are useful as well, but where would a task board be useful? Don't forget the survey. There's a link below here where you can fill in a very quick survey, which gives me some really good information about what people are interested in talking about. And if you know anyone else who would be interested in these Agile Bites, please forward the first link to them. Remember, it's bigagility.com/intro, or you could just write to me, ian@bigagility.com. You'll get a reply from me all the time. Also on the survey, there are links on the survey as well. That's it. This is Ian, and thanks for listening. And watch out for the next Agile Bite.